Welcome to StatTrek's video tutorial on advanced placement statistics. This lesson covers survey sampling methods. In this lesson, we will compare population parameters and sample statistics. We will explain the difference between probability and non-probability samples, and we will describe different types of samples. First, let's talk about population parameters and sample statistics. The reason for conducting a sample survey is to estimate the value of some attribute of a population. A population parameter is the true value of a population attribute based on every element in the population. A sample statistic is an estimate of a population attribute based on sample data. Consider this example. A public opinion pollster wants to know the percentage of voters that favor a flat rate income tax. He could answer this question with a population parameter or with a sample statistic. The population parameter would be an actual percentage based on a census of the total population. The sample statistic would be an estimated percentage based on a survey sample, that is, based on a subset of the population. The quality of a sample statistic, its accuracy, precision, representativeness, is affected by the sampling method. And when we talk about sampling methods, we are talking about the way that sample observations are chosen. As a group, sampling methods fall into two categories: probability samples and non-probability samples. With probability sampling methods, each population element has a known non-zero chance of being in the sample. With non-probability sampling methods, we do not know the probability that each population element will be chosen, or we cannot be sure that each population element has a non-zero chance of being chosen. Non-probability samples offer two potential advantages: convenience and cost. Probability samples also have advantages. They are more likely to be representative of the population, and they lend themselves better to statistical analysis. Let's talk about non-probability sampling methods. There are two main types of non-probability sampling methods: a voluntary sample and a convenience sample. A voluntary sample is made up of people who self-select into the survey. Often these folks have an interest in the main topic of the survey. A convenience sample is made up of people who are easy to reach. Suppose a news program wanted to conduct a quick, inexpensive voter survey. They might consider a voluntary sample or a convenience sample. If they ask viewers to participate in an online survey, they would be using a voluntary sample, since the sample is chosen by the viewers, not by the survey administrator. This type of sample could overrepresent people with an interest in the survey topic, so it could be biased. Or to make things easy on themselves, the news show could just interview people who walk by their office. This would be an example of a convenience sample. The risk is that people walking by the office might not be representative of the population, so the results could be biased. Probability sampling methods overcome some of the analytical problems with non-probability sampling methods. Probability sampling methods have two common features. They rely on random sampling and they produce unbiased estimates of population parameters. The main types of probability sampling methods are simple random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, multi-stage sampling, and systematic random sampling. Simple random sampling refers to any sampling method that has the following properties. The population consists of n objects, where n is uppercase. The sample consists of n objects, where n is lowercase. All possible samples are equally likely to occur. One way to obtain a simple random sample is the lottery method. Each of the n population members is assigned a unique number. The numbers are placed in a bowl and mixed. A blindfolded researcher selects n numbers. Population members having the selected numbers are included in the sample. With stratified sampling, the population is divided into groups based on some characteristic. Then, within each group, subjects are randomly selected. In stratified sampling, the groups are called strata. As an example, suppose we conduct a national survey. We might divide the population into strata based on geography, north, east, south, and west. Then, within each stratum, we would randomly select survey participants. With cluster sampling, every member of the population is assigned to one and only one group. This group is called a cluster. Among all the clusters in the population, a sample of clusters is randomly selected. Only subjects within clusters are surveyed. Note that clusters are different from strata. With stratified sampling, the sample includes elements from each stratum. But with cluster sampling, the sample includes elements only from sampled clusters. With multi-stage sampling, we select a sample by combining two or more different sampling methods. For example, in stage 1, we might use cluster sampling to choose clusters from a population. Then, in stage 2, we might use simple random sampling to select a subset of elements from each chosen cluster. And finally, there's systematic random sampling. With this method, we create a list of every member of the population. Then, from the list, we randomly select the first sample element from the first k elements on the population list. Thereafter, we select every kth element on the list. For example, suppose a company wanted to conduct a job satisfaction survey among its employees. They might create a list of employees and then survey every 10th employee on the list. Note that simple random sampling is not the same as systematic random sampling. With simple random sampling, every possible sample of n elements is equally likely to occur. But that is not the case with systematic random sampling. Let's review. A sampling method refers to the plan for selecting observations from a population to be in the sample for a survey. Sampling methods fall into two broad categories: probability samples and non-probability samples. With probability samples, each element has a known chance of being selected for the sample, but that is not the case for non-probability samples. Non-probability samples are cheaper and easier to administer, but they create problems for statistical analysis. There are two main types of non-probability sampling methods: a voluntary sample and a convenience sample. A voluntary sample is made up of people who self-select into the survey, and a convenience sample is made up of people who are easy to reach. And finally, we described 5 kinds of probability sampling methods: simple random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, multi-stage sampling, and systematic random sampling. All of these methods lend themselves to statistical analysis. The method used most in advanced placement statistics is simple random sampling. Simple random sampling has 3 properties. The population consists of n objects, where n is uppercase. The sample consists of n objects, where n is lowercase. And all possible samples of n objects are equally likely to occur.
That's all, folks.